The moment Theo's vision blurred at the charity gala, he knew something was terribly wrong. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the marble bar, trying to steady himself while the crystal chandeliers above seemed to spin in slow circles. The heat suppressants he had taken that morning should have lasted another 12 hours, but his body was betraying him in the worst possible place, surrounded by the city's most powerful families. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the air conditioning, and a familiar burning sensation crept up his spine like fire licking at dry wood. This was impossible. He had been so careful, so precise with his medication schedule, because being an Omega in this world meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant death. Theo stumbled toward the bathroom, on his designer shoes clicking against polished floors that cost more than most people earned in a year. Every step felt like walking through thick honey, and the expensive cologne of passing guests made his head spin even worse. He could feel eyes on him, whispers starting to spread through the crowd like ripples in still water. The Hartwell family name had protected him for 23 years, but right now, that name felt like a noose tightening around his neck. His fiancé, Marcus, was somewhere in this golden cage of a ballroom, probably networking with oil tycoons and corrupt politicians like he always did. Marcus, who had promised to love him, protect him, keep his secrets safe in a society where Omegas were either hidden away like shameful secrets or sold to the highest bidder. The bathroom door felt impossibly heavy as Theo pushed it open, his reflection in the gilded mirror showing a young man coming apart at the seams. His carefully styled blonde hair was disheveled, green eyes glassy with the beginning of something he had spent his entire adult life preventing. Heat. The word alone made panic claw at his chest. He fumbled for his phone with shaking fingers, pulling up the app that tracked his medication. The screen showed his last dose logged at 6 in the morning, the little blue pill icon mocking him with its cheerful simplicity. 8 hours ago. It should still be working. Unless someone had switched them. Unless someone had replaced his suppressants with sugar pills or worse, with nothing at all. Theo's mind raced backward through the morning, trying to remember every detail with the clarity of someone whose life depended on it. He had taken the pill from the bottle in his private bathroom, the one Marcus had refilled for him just yesterday. Marcus, who handled all their household supplies because Theo was always too busy with charity work and family obligations. Marcus, who had been asking strange questions lately about the black market value of Omega suppressants. Marcus, who had suddenly acquired a new sports car last week despite claiming his investments were struggling. The pieces fell into place like shards of broken glass, cutting Theo from the inside out. He dry swallowed 2 emergency pills from the tiny container he kept hidden in his jacket's inner pocket, praying they would be enough to get him through the night. But even as the bitter tablets dissolved on his tongue, Theo knew he was in serious trouble. His body temperature was climbing, his scent glands beginning to release the sweet, unmistakable fragrance that would draw alphas to him like sharks to blood in the water. The emergency pills might buy him an hour, maybe 2 if he was lucky, but they were not the medical-grade suppressants his body needed. They were street-bought desperation in a bottle, the kind of thing people used when they had no other choice. Theo splashed cold water on his face, trying to think through the fog that was slowly wrapping around his thoughts like cotton wool. He needed to leave. Now, before his scent spread through the ventilation system and turned this elegant party into a feeding frenzy. But walking out meant abandoning the Hartwell family's most important social event of the year, and his father would never forgive such a public humiliation. The old man had barely accepted having an Omega son in the first place, only tolerating Theo's existence because the family needed someone to manage their charitable foundation, a role considered acceptable for Omegas in high society. The bathroom door opened and Theo's heart stopped. But it was just an elderly gentleman who nodded politely and headed for the stalls, apparently not yet able to smell what was coming. Theo took the opportunity to slip out, keeping his head down as he navigated through the crowd toward the exit. The ballroom felt like a maze now, every cluster of people an obstacle, every alpha a potential threat. He could see Marcus across the room, laughing with a group of men in expensive suits, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile bright and false as fool's gold. Looking at him now, Theo wondered how he had ever believed that smile was genuine. They had been engaged for 2 years, together for 3 before that. Marcus had courted him properly, or so it had seemed, with flowers and poetry and promises whispered in the dark. He had seemed different from other alphas, more sensitive, more understanding of what it meant to be Omega in a world designed to devour people like Theo. But maybe that had been the biggest lie of all. Maybe Marcus had simply been better at hiding his true nature, better at playing the long game until Theo trusted him completely. The sports car made sense now, as did the new watch and the designer clothes Marcus had been buying lately. Want Omega heat suppressants sold for thousands on the black market, and Theo went through a bottle every month. Theo was almost to the door when he felt it, a presence that made every hair on his body stand at attention. Someone was watching him with an intensity that felt like physical touch, and not just any someone. An alpha, a powerful one. Theo did not dare turn around, did not dare make eye contact, because that would be acknowledging the pull he felt, the dangerous magnetic force that his compromised body was responding to, despite every logical thought screaming at him to run. He pushed through the exit into the cool night air, gasping like a drowning man finally reaching the surface. The parking lot was dimly lit, with expensive cars gleaming in neat rows like sleeping metal beasts. Theo fumbled for his keys, but his hands were shaking too badly to get them out of his pocket. Behind him, he heard the door open again, footsteps approaching with measured confidence. He finally managed to pull out his keys, but they slipped from his sweaty fingers and clattered to the ground. Theo bent to pick them up, and that was when he caught the scent. Sandalwood and rain and something darker, something that smelled like danger wrapped in silk. A hand appeared in his vision, holding his keys. Theo's eyes traveled up from polished black shoes to tailored suit pants, past a jacket that probably cost more than his car, to a face that made his breath catch for entirely different reasons than fear. The man was perhaps 30, with dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that suggested he did not care much about styling it, and eyes so deep brown they looked black in the dim light. There was a scar running through his left eyebrow, a thin white line that somehow made him more attractive rather than less. But it was the way he held himself that told Theo everything he needed to know. This was not just any alpha. This was someone dangerous, someone powerful, someone who could probably kill without blinking. "You dropped these," the man said, his voice low and smooth like expensive whiskey. He spoke with a slight accent that Theo could not quite place. Something European maybe, or Russian. "And you should not be out here alone, not in your condition." Theo snatched the keys back, trying to ignore how his fingers tingled where they brushed against the stranger's hand. "I'm fine, thank you." His voice came out shakier than he wanted, and he cursed himself for showing weakness. Rule number 1 of being an Omega: never show weakness to an alpha you do not know. "You are very far from fine." The man stepped closer, and Theo backed up until he hit his car. "Your suppressants have failed, and you are maybe an hour away from full heat. 2 at most. Going home alone would be extremely unwise." "How is that any of your business?" Theo demanded, trying to sound brave even though his knees felt like water. "I don't know you, and I don't need help from some random alpha who thinks he can just—" "Luca Moretti," the man interrupted, holding out his hand in a gesture that seemed almost mocking in its formality. "And I am not random. I am the person who has been watching your fiancé sell your medication to my competitors for the past 3 months. The world tilted sideways. Theo stared at this stranger, this Luca Moretti, trying to process words that made no sense. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus Blackwood has been stealing your heat suppressants and selling them to a drug ring that operates out of the East Side," Luca said, his voice matter-of-fact as if he were discussing the weather. "He has made approximately $47,000 so far. I know this because I run the organization he is selling to, though he does not know that I know what he is selling or who he is taking them from. Until tonight." Theo felt like he had been punched in the stomach. $47,000. 3 months. That meant Marcus had been planning this since long before Theo had noticed anything wrong. "You're lying. You're some kind of criminal trying to—" "I am exactly some kind of criminal," Luca agreed, and there was something almost amused in his dark eyes. "But I am not lying. Your fiancé is a greedy, stupid man who thought he could steal from his Omega and face no consequences. He was wrong." "Why are you telling me this?" Theo demanded, even though part of him already knew the answer, could see it in the way Luca was looking at him like he was a puzzle to be solved. Because you are about to go into heat with no proper medication, no safe place, and a fiancé who has proven he cannot be trusted with your well-being, Luca said simply. And because I am offering you an alternative. I don't need alternatives from Mafia criminals, Theo said, but his voice lacked conviction. His body was getting hotter by the minute, and he could feel his scent getting stronger, spilling out into the night air like perfume from a broken bottle. See, there perhaps not, Luca acknowledged. But you need somewhere safe to ride out the next 3 to 5 days, and you need someone who will not take advantage of your vulnerable state. I can provide both. Why would you help me? Theo asked, suspicion cutting through the fog in his mind. What do you want in return? Luca's expression shifted into something Theo could not quite read. Let us call it a business investment. Your family has connections I need, and you have information about the Hartwell Empire that could be very valuable. Plus, I do not like men who hurt Omegas, and your Marcus has been doing exactly that. Before Theo could respond, he heard voices approaching from the building. A group of alphas, their conversation loud and alcohol loosened. They would smell him any second now. Panic seized Theo's chest in a tight fist. Luca seemed to sense his fear because he moved closer, using his own scent to mask Theo's, a gesture that was surprisingly gentle for someone who had just admitted to being a criminal. You have about 30 seconds to make a choice, Luca said quietly. You can get in your car and try to drive home, where your fiancé is surely waiting to pretend he cares while planning his next theft. You can stay here and face whatever those men decide to do when they catch your scent, or you can come with me to a place where you will be safe, fed, and protected until your heat passes. Your choice, Theo Hartwell. The use of his full name should have been alarming, proof that this stranger had been researching him, watching him. But right now, with his body temperature rising and his scent drawing predators, Theo found he did not care about the implications. He cared about survival. The voices were getting closer. One of the men laughed, then stopped mid-sound. Do you smell that? Someone said, and Theo's decision was made. Fine, he whispered, hating how desperate he sounded. Take me wherever. Just get me out of here. Luca did not gloat or smile in triumph. He simply nodded once, then guided Theo toward a black car that looked like it cost more than Theo's entire trust fund. The door opened smoothly, revealing leather seats and privacy glass. Theo climbed in, his last coherent thought being that he was either making the best or worst decision of his life. Luca slid into the driver's seat, and the engine purred to life like a contented cat. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Theo saw Marcus emerge from the building, looking around with an expression of mild concern that did not reach his eyes. The car moved through the city streets like a shadow, and Theo leaned his head against the cool window, trying to focus on anything except the fire building in his veins. Luca drove with casual confidence, one hand on the wheel, occasionally glancing at Theo through the rearview mirror. There is water in the compartment next to you, he said. Drink it. Dehydration will make everything worse. Theo wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some dignity, but his throat was so dry it hurt. He found the bottle and drank deeply, the cold water providing momentary relief. Where are we going? He managed to ask. My home, Luca replied. It is secure, private, and far enough from your social circle that no one will find you unless I want them to. That's not ominous at all, Theo muttered, but there was no real heat in it. He was too tired, too overwhelmed, too betrayed to muster proper sarcasm. I understand this is difficult, Luca said, and for the first time there was something almost gentle in his voice. But I promise you will be safe with me. I have many faults, but harming Omegas is not among them. Theo wanted to ask why a Mafia boss would care about Omega welfare, wanted to question everything about this insane situation, but his mind was getting fuzzier by the minute. The heat was coming faster now, his emergency pills proving useless against the onslaught. He curled into himself on the leather seat, trying to control his breathing like his therapist had taught him, on in through the nose, out through the mouth. But even breathing was becoming difficult when every intake of air brought Luca's scent, rich and commanding and impossibly appealing to Theo's compromised Omega instincts. The car finally stopped in front of a building that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread about modern architecture. All glass and steel and sharp angles that caught the streetlights in interesting ways. Luca came around to open Theo's door, offering his hand with old-fashioned courtesy. Theo took it because standing on his own seemed impossible, letting this dangerous stranger guide him into an elevator that probably cost more than his college education. The ride up was silent, except for soft music playing overhead, something classical that Theo's heat-addled brain could not identify. The penthouse was exactly what Theo expected from a wealthy criminal. Expensive furniture arranged with careful taste, art on the walls that was probably stolen from museums, and windows that offered a view of the entire city spread out like scattered diamonds. But Luca did not pause to show off his wealth. He led Theo directly through the main room to a hallway, then to a bedroom that smelled clean and neutral, carefully scented to not trigger Omega instincts. "This is yours for as long as you need it," Luca said, gesturing to a space that was bigger than Theo's entire apartment. "The bathroom is through that door. I have taken the liberty of stocking it with proper suppressants, though they will not help much now. You will need to ride this out naturally." Theo sank onto the bed, which was so soft it felt like lying on a cloud. "Why are you being nice to me?" he asked, genuine confusion cutting through the haze. "You said this was business, but this feels like more than business." Luca was quiet for a moment, standing in the doorway backlit by the hall light. "Perhaps it is," he finally said. "Or perhaps I simply recognize someone who has been betrayed by a person they trusted, and I remember how that feels." Before Theo could ask what he meant, Luca stepped back. "I will be close by if you need anything. Call out and I will hear you. Try to rest." The door closed softly, leaving Theo alone in a stranger's bedroom, facing the reality of what was coming. His heat was building like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and terrifying. But for the first time in hours, he felt something other than panic. He felt impossibly safe. And that scared him almost as much as everything else combined. Theo woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the immediate, overwhelming awareness that his heat had fully taken hold during the night. His body ached in ways that made simple movement feel like climbing a mountain, and the sheets beneath him were soaked through with sweat despite the cool temperature of the room. For a confused moment, he could not remember where he was or how he had gotten there, his mind fuzzy with fever and confusion. Then memory crashed back like a wave, bringing with it the charity gala, Marcus's betrayal, and the dark-eyed stranger who had promised safety in exchange for nothing Theo could understand. He sat up slowly, his muscles protesting every movement, and took stock of his situation with whatever clarity he could manage. The bedroom was exactly as he remembered, decorated in shades of gray and cream that spoke of expensive taste and careful planning. Someone had left a tray on the bedside table while he slept, with fresh water, fruit that looked like it came from some fancy organic market, and crackers that were probably meant to settle his stomach. There was also a note written in elegant handwriting that seemed almost too refined for someone who claimed to be a criminal. "Eat something. The medication is in the bathroom cabinet, top shelf. Call if you need anything. L." Theo's hands shook as he reached for the water, drinking it down so fast he nearly choked. His throat felt like sandpaper, and every swallow hurt in a way that reminded him just how vulnerable he was right now. Heat was not just physical discomfort, though that was bad enough. It was a complete loss of control, a surrendering of everything that made him himself to biology and instinct. For 3 to 5 days, he would be nothing more than need and want, unable to think clearly, unable to protect himself, unable to do anything except survive until it passed. And he was going through it in a stranger's house, trusting a man who had admitted to being part of organized crime. The bathroom was as luxurious as the bedroom, all marble and gold fixtures that gleamed under soft lighting. Theo found the medication exactly where the note said it would be, a full bottle of professional-grade heat suppressants that would have cost him hundreds of dollars at a legitimate pharmacy. But these were not legitimate, he realized as he examined the label. These were black market, and the kind of thing that only people with serious connections could acquire. The kind of thing Luca Moretti apparently had access to in abundance. Theo took 2 pills even though he knew they would not stop his heat now, only make it slightly more bearable, slightly less all-consuming. He caught sight of himself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. His blonde hair was a mess, sticking up in all directions like he had been electrocuted. His green eyes were too bright, pupils dilated with fever, and his skin had a flush that spread from his cheeks down his neck. He looked exactly like what he was, an Omega in heat, and the shame of it burned almost as hot as the fever itself. All his life, Theo had worked to be more than his biology, to prove that Omegas could be smart and capable and worthy of respect. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, he was just another Omega body betraying its owner. The shower helped, at least temporarily. Theo stood underwater as cold as he could stand it, letting it wash away the sweat and the shame and the lingering scent of his own distress. He found clothes laid out for him when he emerged, soft cotton pants and a t-shirt that were definitely not his, but fit well enough. They smelled like expensive laundry detergent and something else, something that made his Omega instincts purr with contentment. He tried not to think about why that was, tried not to acknowledge that his body recognized Luca's scent and liked it far more than it should. When Theo finally felt steady enough to leave the bedroom, he found Luca in the main living area, sitting at a dining table with a laptop and several phones spread out like he was running a small corporation, which, Theo supposed, he probably was. The Mafia boss looked up as Theo entered, his dark eyes assessing without being invasive, taking in Theo's condition with the efficiency of someone who knew what to look for. He was dressed more casually than last night, in dark jeans and a simple black shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less. "You should be resting," Luca said by way of greeting, closing his laptop with a soft click. "The first day is always the hardest." "I've been through heat before," Theo replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I know how it works." But even as he said it, he swayed slightly on his feet, and Luca was there in an instant, steadying him with hands that were surprisingly gentle. "Sit," Luca commanded, guiding Theo to the couch with a firmness that left no room for argument. "You have not eaten properly in at least 24 hours, and your body is using every bit of energy it has. Food first, then we can talk." Theo wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some independence, but his stomach chose that moment to growl loudly enough to be embarrassing. Luca's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement, though he was kind enough not to comment. Instead, he disappeared into what Theo assumed was the kitchen, returning a few minutes later with soup that smelled like heaven and bread that was still warm from wherever he had acquired it. "Eat slowly," Luca instructed, settling into a chair across from Theo with his own cup of coffee. "Your stomach will not appreciate being rushed after fasting." Theo ate because refusing would have been stupid pride, and he had already abandoned most of his pride the moment he got into Luca's car. The soup was perfect, rich and flavorful without being heavy, exactly what his body needed. He ate in silence, aware of Luca watching him, but not in a way that felt predatory or wrong. It was more like being observed by someone who took his responsibilities seriously, even when those responsibilities included uninvited Omega house guests. "Why are you doing this?" Theo asked finally, setting down his spoon and meeting Luca's gaze directly. "And don't tell me it's just business. Nobody goes to this much trouble for a business investment." Luca was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands like he was deciding how much truth to share. "When I was younger," he finally said, "I watched my sister go through something similar. Not exactly the same, but close enough. She trusted someone who betrayed that trust in the worst possible way, and it nearly destroyed her. I swore then that I would never stand by and watch someone hurt people who could not defend themselves." "Your sister was an Omega?" Theo asked, surprised by this glimpse into Luca's personal life. "No," Luca said simply, "but she was vulnerable, and someone took advantage of that vulnerability. The details do not matter. What matters is that I learned early that power without purpose is just cruelty wearing a different name." Theo absorbed this. Were you trying to reconcile the image of a mafia boss with someone who protected vulnerable people out of principle? "So you run a criminal organization, but you have moral standards?" "Everyone has lines they will not cross," Luca replied with a slight shrug. "Mine are simply different from most people's. I deal in things that society has deemed illegal, but that people need anyway. Medicine, protection, information. I do not deal in people, I do not deal in children, and I do not tolerate anyone who does." "How noble for a criminal," Theo said, but there was no real bite in it. He was too tired and too confused to muster proper sarcasm. "I never claimed to be noble," Luca corrected. I claim to have standards. There is a difference. He stood, collecting Theo's empty dishes with the ease of someone comfortable in his own space. You should rest more. Your heat will get worse before it gets better, and you need to conserve your strength. But Theo did not want to go back to the bedroom, did not want to be alone with his thoughts and his treacherous body. Tell me about Marcus, he said instead. You said you've been watching him for 3 months. What else do you know? Luca paused, studying Theo with an expression that might have been concern. Are you certain you want those answers right now? Some truths are easier to bear when you are not fighting a fever. I want to know, Theo insisted, even though part of him was terrified of what he might learn. I need to know how blind I was. Luca sighed, setting the dishes aside and returning to his seat. Marcus Blackwood has been in debt for approximately 8 months, gambling mostly. So he owes money to several very unpleasant people, the kind who do not accept excuses or payment plans. He started stealing your medication as a way to earn quick money, selling it to dealers who then resell it at markup to desperate Omegas. Over 3 months, he has stolen and sold 90 pills, which is why your heats have been so unpredictable lately. 90 pills. 3 full bottles. Theo felt sick, and it had nothing to do with his heat. He told me there was a manufacturing shortage. He said the pharmacy was having trouble keeping them in stock. There is no shortage, Luca said gently. There never was. He has been replacing your real medication with sugar pills and selling the genuine product. Last night, he gave you nothing at all. Or probably hoping you would go into heat at home where he could claim ignorance and play the concerned fiancé. Why? Theo whispered, though he was not sure if he was asking why Marcus had done it or why Luca was telling him. Maybe both. Money makes people do terrible things, Luca replied, and Marcus is not a good person, regardless of how charming he pretends to be. I have been investigating him for other reasons, business matters, and discovered what he was doing to you almost by accident. I had someone at the gala last night specifically to intervene if necessary. You were planning to approach me either way, Theo realized, the pieces clicking together. The heat was just an opportunity. Yes, Luca admitted without hesitation. I need information about your family's shipping operations, specifically the routes they use and the manifests they file. Your father's company has been moving cargo for some very interesting clients, and I want to know who and what. I was going to offer you a business deal, money in exchange for access to those records. But when I saw what Marcus had done, when I realized you were going into heat in the middle of a room full of unpredictable alphas, my plans changed. So you saved me out of the goodness of your heart? Theo asked skeptically. I saved you because it was the right thing to do, Luca corrected, and because I believe you deserve better than a fiancé who values your medication more than your well-being. The business arrangement can wait until you are recovered and thinking clearly. Right now, my only concern is making sure you survive the next few days safely. Theo wanted to argue, wanted to poke holes in this logic, but another wave of heat washed over him, stealing his breath and his ability to think. He doubled over, clutching his stomach as cramps seized his muscles. Luca was beside him immediately, supporting him with steady hands that did not wander or take advantage. Bedroom, Luca said firmly. Now, you have pushed yourself too far already. Theo did not have the strength to fight. He let Luca guide him back to the guest room, let himself be settled onto the bed with pillows arranged to support his aching body. Luca pulled the curtains closed to block out the bright sunlight, then placed a fresh bottle of water on the nightstand along with more medication. I will check on you in a few hours, Luca said. If you need anything before then, there is an intercom button on the wall. Press it, and I will hear you. Luca, Theo called out as the other man reached the door. Thank you, for everything, even if I don't understand why yet. Luca turned, and in the dim light, his expression was softer than Theo had seen it. You do not need to understand everything right now. Just rest and heal. The rest will make sense eventually. The door closed, leaving Theo alone with his fever dreams and his racing thoughts. He curled into the pillows, breathing in the scent that lingered on the sheets, that same mix of sandalwood and rain that belonged to Luca. It should have bothered him, should have made him uncomfortable to find comfort in a stranger's scent. But his Omega instincts did not care about logic or appropriate boundaries. So they only cared that this alpha had protected him, had fed him, had shown him kindness when everyone else had shown him cruelty. Hours blurred together in a haze of heat and half-sleep. Theo drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes waking to find fresh water and food had been left for him, sometimes hearing the soft sound of Luca moving around the penthouse. Once, he woke from a nightmare about Marcus, screaming his name in panic, and Luca appeared almost instantly, sitting on the edge of the bed and talking in low, soothing tones until Theo's breathing settled and his heart stopped racing. "He is not here," Luca reminded him, his hand resting lightly on Theo's shoulder in a gesture that was grounding rather than possessive. "He cannot hurt you here. You are safe." "How can you promise that?" Theo asked through chattering teeth, his body shaking with chills despite the fever burning through him. "Because I have killed people for less than what he did to you," Luca said simply, and it should have been terrifying, but somehow it was not. Somehow it was the most comforting thing Theo had heard in months. On the second day, Theo's heat peaked, turning him into nothing but sensation and need. He lost track of time, lost track of where he was, lost track of everything except the burning in his veins that demanded relief he could not have. Through it all, Luca was there, not in the room, but close enough that Theo could hear him, could call out if he needed something. The Mafia boss never crossed the line, never took advantage, never did anything except make sure Theo had water and medication and cool cloths for his burning skin. It was during one of his more lucid moments on the third day that Theo's phone started ringing, the sound cutting through the quiet of the bedroom like an alarm. He fumbled for it on the nightstand, seeing Marcus's name flash across the screen. For a moment, he just stared at it, wondering what his ex-fiancé possibly had to say now. Then, without really thinking about it, he answered. "Theo, thank God," Marcus's voice came through, dripping with false concern. "Where are you? I've been worried sick. You disappeared from the gala, and nobody has seen you since. Are you all right?" Theo's hand tightened on the phone, anger cutting through the fog of his heat like a blade. "Where am I? I'm somewhere safe, somewhere you can't steal from me anymore." There was a pause on the other end. One and Theo could almost hear Marcus recalculating his strategy. "I don't know what you're talking about. Theo, you're not thinking clearly. Heat can make Omegas paranoid and confused. Just tell me where you are, and I'll come get you." "I know about the pills, Marcus," Theo said, his voice stronger now despite his weakness. "I know you've been selling my medication. I know about your debts and your gambling and everything else you've been lying about." Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, the concern was gone from his voice, replaced by something colder. "Someone's been filling your head with stories. Who are you with, Theo? What alpha got to you?" "That's none of your business anymore," Theo replied. "We're done. The engagement is over. Don't contact me again." "You can't break our engagement," Marcus said. And now there was anger creeping into his tone. "Our families have contracts. There are legal agreements. You can't just run away because you're having some kind of heat-induced breakdown." "Watch me," Theo said, and ended the call. His hands were shaking, but not from weakness this time. From the pure, righteous fury of someone who had finally seen the truth and refused to look away. He blocked Marcus's number, then blocked it on every social media platform and messaging app he could think of. If Marcus wanted to talk to him, he would have to go through lawyers, and by then, Theo would be ready. Luca appeared in the doorway moments later, as if he had been listening. "Was that wise?" he asked, though there was something approving in his expression. "Probably not," Theo admitted. But it felt good." "Sometimes feeling good is more important than being wise," Luca said, settling into the chair beside the bed. "How are you holding up?" "Better," Theo said, and realized it was true. The peak had passed, and though he was still feverish and exhausted, the worst of it was over. "I think I'm through the hardest part." "The heat will continue for another day or two," Luca warned. "But yes, you should start feeling more like yourself soon." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and Theo found himself studying Luca with new eyes. This man who had taken him in, who had protected him, who had asked for nothing in return despite claiming it was a business arrangement. "Why haven't you asked me about my family's records yet?" Theo asked suddenly. Because you are still in heat, Luca replied as if it were obvious. Business discussions require clear minds and fair negotiations. I will not take advantage of your compromised state to extract agreements you might regret later. Most people would, Theo pointed out. I am not most people, Luca said simply. And besides, I am in no rush. Your information will be just as valuable in a week as it is today. Theo considered this, considered everything he had learned about Luca Moretti in the past 3 days. You're not what I expected a Mafia boss to be. What did you expect? Luca asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Someone scarier, I think. Someone more obviously dangerous. I am scary, Luca assured him. I am very dangerous, but only to people who deserve it. You do not deserve it, so you get to see a different side. How many sides do you have? Theo wondered aloud. Luca smiled. And it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less burdened. Enough to keep things interesting. Rest now. Tomorrow you will feel better, and we can talk about what comes next. As Luca stood to leave, Theo caught his hand without thinking, his Omega instincts driving the gesture before his rational mind could stop it. Stay, he said softly. Just for a little while. I don't want to be alone with my thoughts right now. Luca looked at their joined hands, then at Theo's face, something unreadable passing through his dark eyes. All right, he agreed, settling back into the chair. I will stay. And he did, sitting quietly while Theo drifted in and out of sleep, a steady presence that made the darkness less frightening and the loneliness more bearable. In his half-conscious state, Theo found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, he had been rescued by exactly the right kind of dangerous. By the 4th day, Theo's heat had faded to something manageable, leaving behind exhaustion that settled into his bones like lead weights. He woke to the smell of coffee and something sweet baking, a combination that pulled him from sleep more effectively than any alarm. For the first time since arriving at Luca's penthouse, his mind felt clear, sharp enough to actually process the magnitude of what had happened over the past week. He had left his fiancé, abandoned his social obligations, and placed himself entirely in the hands of a man who ran criminal operations for a living. Any rational person would have called it insanity, but lying there in sheets that smelled like safety, Theo found he did not regret a single choice. When he showered properly for the first time in days, standing under hot water until his muscles relaxed and his skin felt like his own again instead of something borrowed and strange. The clothes Luca had left for him were still there, clean and neatly folded, but Theo found himself wanting his own things, some piece of his old life to ground him in reality. He made a mental note to ask about retrieving items from his apartment, though the thought of facing that space, contaminated by Marcus's lies, made his stomach turn. Maybe he would just buy new everything and start completely fresh, like a snake shedding skin that no longer fit. When Theo emerged from the bedroom, he found Luca in the kitchen, pulling something that looked suspiciously like homemade croissants from the oven. The Mafia boss was dressed casually again, in dark pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking more like someone's boyfriend preparing breakfast than a dangerous criminal. It created a strange disconnect in Theo's mind. This image of domestic normalcy overlaid on everything he knew about who Luca actually was. You bake? Theo asked, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Luca glanced up, and something flickered across his face when he saw Theo standing there, healthy and whole and present in a way he had not been for days. I do many things that would surprise you, he replied, setting the pastries on a cooling rack. Cooking is therapeutic. Baking requires precision and patience, qualities that serve me well in other areas of my life. I'm trying to imagine you measuring flour while planning criminal activities, Theo said, sliding onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. Why not both at the same time? Luca asked with that slight smile that made him look almost playful. I am an excellent multitasker. He plated 2 croissants with butter and jam, sliding one across to Theo along with fresh coffee. How are you feeling? Honestly? Tired, Theo admitted, accepting the offering. Confused, angry at myself for not seeing the truth sooner. Grateful to you, which feels strange because I barely know you. He took a bite of the croissant and nearly groaned at how perfect it was, flaky and buttery and exactly what his recovering body needed, Also impressed by your baking skills, which was not on my list of expected emotions today. Luca settled onto the stool across from him, with his own coffee, cradling the cup like it was precious. Our gratitude is not something you should feel strange about. I did what anyone decent would have done in that situation. Except most people are not decent, Theo pointed out. Most people would have either ignored it or taken advantage. You did neither. Then perhaps I am not most people, Luca said simply, echoing his words from days earlier. Or perhaps I simply understand what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trust, and I would not wish that experience on anyone. Theo studied him over the rim of his coffee cup, taking in the scar through Luca's eyebrow, the careful way he held himself, the shadows that lived behind his dark eyes. "Tell me about your sister," he said suddenly. "The one you mentioned before? What happened to her?" Luca was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his coffee cup in a rhythm that suggested he was weighing how much to reveal. "Her name was Isabella," he finally said, his voice softer than Theo had ever heard it. "She was 3 years younger than me, brilliant and kind and entirely too trusting. When I was 22 and she was 19, she fell in love with a man who seemed perfect on the surface. Charming, educated, from a good family. He courted her properly, won over our parents, convinced everyone that he was worthy of her. But he was not," Theo guessed, his chest tightening with the certainty of where this story was going. "No," Luca confirmed. "He was a con artist, working with a group that targeted wealthy families. They would romance someone with money, gain access to family accounts and properties, and then disappear with everything they could carry. By the time we realized what was happening, Isabella had given him access to her trust fund, our mother's jewelry, even the deed to a vacation home our grandfather had left her. When we confronted him, he vanished, and Isabella was left with nothing but debts and shame." "I'm so sorry," Theo said, meaning it completely. "That's horrible." "It gets worse," Luca continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Isabella could not handle the betrayal or the humiliation. She was already fragile, struggling with things we did not fully understand at the time. The loss pushed her over an edge we did not know she was standing on. She took her own life 6 months after he left." The words hung in the air like broken glass, sharp and painful. Yet Theo felt his throat close with emotion for a woman he had never met, for the brother who had lost her. "Luca, I spent the next 5 years finding everyone involved in that scheme," Luca said, his tone now completely flat, empty of everything except a cold finality that sent chills down Theo's spine. "Every single person who helped destroy my sister's life. Some I exposed publicly, ruining their reputations the way they had ruined hers. Others I handled more directly. By the time I was finished, that particular criminal enterprise no longer existed, and the people who ran it learned that some debts can never be repaid." Theo understood what Luca was not saying, understood that handled more directly meant things he probably should not think too hard about. "That's why you do what you do now," he realized. "Why you have rules about who you help and who you hurt." "I learned that power is only useful if you point it in the right direction," Luca agreed. "I could have become like the people who hurt Isabella, using my resources for selfish gain. Instead, I built something different. Not legal, not always moral, but honest in its own way. I deal in things people need, and I protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is the least I can do for the sister I failed to save." "You did not fail her," Theo said firmly, surprised by the intensity of his own conviction. "You were 22 years old, and you could not have known what he was planning. The only person who failed her was the man who betrayed her trust." Luca's expression shifted into something Theo could not quite read, gratitude mixed with old grief, and maybe something else. "You are kind to say that, even if I do not fully believe it. But it is why I brought you here, why I could not stand by and watch Marcus do to you what that man did to Isabella. You are strong, stronger than my sister was, but everyone has a breaking point. I did not want to see you reach yours." Theo felt something crack open in his chest, some wall he had been maintaining without realizing it. This man, this dangerous criminal with blood on his hands and shadows in his past, had saved him not for business reasons or personal gain, but because he could not bear to watch history repeat itself. It was the most human thing anyone had done for Theo in longer than he could remember, and it terrified him how much it mattered. "Thank you for telling me," Theo said quietly. "I know that could not have been easy." "Very little worth doing is easy," Luca replied, then seemed to shake off the weight of the conversation like a dog shedding water. "But enough darkness for one morning. You need to eat more, regain your strength, and we should discuss what happens next." Right? The future. Theo had been so focused on surviving the present that he had barely thought about what came after. "I suppose I need to go home eventually," he said, though the word home felt wrong when applied to the apartment he had shared with Marcus. "Do you want to go home?" Luca asked, his dark eyes sharp and assessing. "Or do you want to go back, because you feel you should?" Theo opened his mouth to say, of course he wanted to go home, then closed it again when he realized it would be a lie. "I do not know," he admitted. "Everything I own is there, my clothes and books and all the things that make up a life. But the thought of walking into that space, knowing Marcus was there, touching my things, lying to my face every single day, I do not know if I can do that." "Then do not," Luca said simply. "Stay here until you figure out what you actually want, not what you think you should want. I have more than enough space, and your presence is not an inconvenience." "I cannot just move in with you," Theo protested, even though part of him desperately wanted to accept the offer. "You barely know me, and I barely know you. That would be crazy." "Would it be crazier than returning to an apartment where your ex-fiancé has keys and no reason to respect your boundaries?" Luca countered. "Would it be crazier than pretending everything is fine while you fall apart inside? I am offering you time and space to heal, nothing more sinister than that." "But you said you needed information about my family's business," Theo reminded him. "This feels like you are being too nice without getting what you want in return." Luca leaned back in his chair, studying Theo with an intensity that made him feel seen in ways both uncomfortable and thrilling. "Let me be very clear about something," he said. "Yes, I am interested in your family's shipping records. Yes, that information would be valuable to me. But I will not pressure you for it while you are vulnerable, and I will not make our arrangement conditional on you providing it. If you decide to help me, it will be because you choose to, with a clear mind and fair compensation. If you decide not to help me, I will accept that, and you will still be welcome here for as long as you need." "Why?" Theo asked, frustrated by his inability to understand Luca's motivations. "Why would you do that? It makes no business sense." "Because not everything is about business," Luca said gently. "Sometimes things are about being a decent person, and sometimes they are about wanting to help someone who reminds you of people you could not help before. You want complicated reasons because simple ones seem too good to be true, but I promise you my motivations here are exactly as simple as they appear." Theo wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that someone could be kind without expecting something terrible in return. But trust had gotten him hurt before, so he had led him to give Marcus 5 years of his life and nearly his entire sense of self. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "All of it. The staying, the information, everything." "That is fair," Luca agreed, finishing his coffee and standing. "Think for as long as you need. In the meantime, I have some business to attend to today, meetings I cannot postpone. You are welcome to anything in the apartment. There are books, movies, a home office if you want to use a computer. The building has a gym on the 20th floor if you feel up to exercise, though I recommend waiting another day or two before attempting anything strenuous." "You are just going to leave me alone here?" Theo asked, surprised. "What if I go through your things or steal something?" Luca's smile was genuine this time, enriching his eyes and making him look almost carefree. "Then I would have vastly misjudged your character, which I do not believe I have. Besides, anything truly sensitive is not kept here. This is my home, not my office. You will find nothing more incriminating than questionable movie choices and too many cookbooks." "You have questionable movie choices?" Theo asked, momentarily distracted. "Everyone has questionable movie choices," Luca replied. "Mine involve far too many action films with improbable physics. Judge me if you must." He collected his jacket from where it hung by the door, checking his phone briefly before pocketing it. "I should be back by evening. Call me if you need anything, and I mean anything. My number is programmed into the house phone." Then he was gone. Weyand leaving Theo alone in a penthouse that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. For a long moment, Theo just sat there, processing the surreal nature of his situation. 4 days ago, he had been at a charity gala with his fiancé, believing his life was on track even if it felt slightly wrong. Now he was living with a Mafia boss who baked croissants and mourned his sister and offered sanctuary without asking for anything in return. Theo spent the morning exploring the apartment with the careful attention of someone trying to understand a puzzle. The living spaces were beautiful, but surprisingly personal, decorated with things that spoke of actual taste rather than hired designers. There were photographs on shelves, though none showed Luca himself. Instead, they captured places, moments frozen in time. A sunset over water, a street market full of colorful fabric, an old building with ivy climbing its walls. Each image was numbered and dated on the back, a careful catalogue of memories from someone who clearly valued preserving beauty. The bookshelves revealed even more, a collection that ranged from classic literature to modern thrillers, philosophy texts next to cookbooks, everything organized in a system Theo could not quite decipher. He pulled out a worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, finding notes in the margins written in what must be Luca's handwriting. Brief observations about revenge and justice, questions about whether some wrongs could ever be made right. It felt invasive reading them, but also illuminating, like finding pieces of a map to someone's inner landscape. The home office Luca had mentioned was exactly what he said it would be. At the workspace with a computer, printer, and desk supplies, but nothing that screamed criminal enterprise. Theo sat in the leather chair, running his fingers over the smooth surface of the desk, and found himself thinking about his family's shipping company. The records Luca wanted were not exactly secret, but accessing them would mean going behind his father's back, betraying family trust the way Marcus had betrayed his personal trust. The parallel made him uncomfortable, but so did the question of what his father's company might be involved in that interested someone like Luca Moretti. His phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. Theo pulled it from his pocket and saw his mother's name flashing across the screen. He stared at it for 3 rings, debating whether to answer, before his ingrained sense of obligation won out. "Hello, some mother." "Theo Alexander Hartwell, where in heaven's name have you been?" His mother's voice came through sharp and worried in equal measure. "Marcus called 3 days ago saying you had disappeared from the gala and nobody has heard from you since. Your father has been beside himself with worry." Theo doubted his father had been beside himself with anything except annoyance at the social embarrassment, but he did not say so. "I am fine. I just needed some space to think." "Space to think?" his mother repeated, her tone climbing toward hysteria. "You vanish without a word during one of our most important events. You ignore all our calls, and you needed space to think? What could possibly be so urgent that you could not tell your family where you were?" "I found out Marcus has been stealing from me," Theo said bluntly, so deciding there was no point in softening the truth. "He has been selling my medication for profit and lying about it. The engagement is over." There was silence on the other end, so complete that Theo thought the call might have dropped. Then his mother's voice returned, lower and more controlled. "That is a very serious accusation, Theo. Are you certain? Heat can sometimes cause confusion and—" "I am certain," Theo interrupted, "and please do not blame this on heat-induced confusion. I have evidence, I have testimony, and I have the fact that my suppressants stopped working because Marcus replaced them with fake pills. The engagement is over, and I will not be changing my mind." Another pause. "Your father will not be pleased. There are contracts, legal agreements between our families. Unbreaking the engagement will have consequences." "Then there will be consequences," Theo said, surprised by his own calm. "But I will not marry someone who steals from me and lies about it. If father wants to be angry, he can be angry at Marcus for breaking trust, not at me for refusing to accept betrayal." "Where are you staying?" his mother asked, and Theo could hear her shifting gears, moving from confrontation to information gathering. "Are you safe? Do you need us to send someone to collect you?" "I am safe," Theo assured her, looking around Luca's office with its expensive furnishings and careful organization. "I am staying with a friend, and I am fine. I just need some time to figure things out before I come home." "What friend?" his mother pressed. Sat, you have never mentioned having friends close enough to stay with during a crisis. Theo realized his mistake too late. His mother was right. He had never been good at making friends outside the social circles approved by his family. Just someone I met recently. Someone who has been kind to me when I needed kindness. Theo, you are worrying me, his mother said, her voice softening. This is not like you. Running away, making accusations, staying with mysterious friends. Are you sure you are thinking clearly? I am thinking more clearly than I have in years, Theo replied honestly. And I am not running away. I am running towards something better, even if I do not know what that is yet. He took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would create another firestorm. Tell father I will need access to my trust fund. I'm going to need my own place, my own life, separate from the family business and its expectations. Absolutely not, his mother said immediately. Your trust fund is not accessible until you are 25 or married, you know that. Your father will never approve early access, especially not for something like this. Then I will find another way, Theo said, feeling something settle in his chest, a determination he had not known he possessed. But one way or another, I am done living my life according to other people's plans. I am done being the perfect Omega son who never causes trouble. If that disappoints you and father, I am sorry, but I am not sorry enough to keep pretending. He ended the call before his mother could respond, his hands shaking with adrenaline and fear and something that might have been freedom. And for 23 years, he had done everything right, followed every rule, met every expectation. And where had it gotten him? Engaged to a thief, dependent on a family who saw him as a useful chess piece, trapped in a life that felt like wearing clothes 3 sizes too small. Theo stood and began pacing the office, his mind racing through possibilities and problems. He had some money in his personal account, enough for maybe a month of modest living. He had marketable skills, a degree in business management that his father had insisted he earn, even if he never intended to let Theo use it. He had connections through the charity foundation he ran, people who might help if he asked. And he had, apparently, a Mafia boss who seemed genuinely interested in his well-being for reasons Theo still did not fully understand. The phone in the office rang, the old-fashioned landline that Luca had mentioned. Theo stared at it for a moment before answering. Hello? Theo, it is Luca. The Mafia boss's voice came through clear and steady. I apologize for calling, but I thought you should know that Marcus showed up at one of my legitimate businesses an hour ago, asking questions about you. He seems to think I am involved in your disappearance. Theo's stomach dropped. How did he even know to look for you? He has been making inquiries, asking around about who might have approached you at the gala. Someone gave him my name, probably hoping for a reward. He is quite determined to find you. What did you tell him? Theo asked, his heart racing. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about, Luca replied calmly. But he is not stupid, just desperate. But he will keep looking, and eventually he might cause problems. I wanted you to be prepared. Prepared how? Theo asked, anxiety threading through his voice. What am I supposed to do if he finds me? He will not find you here, Luca assured him. This building has excellent security, and nobody gets past the lobby without my permission. But you need to decide what you want. If you want to face him, I can arrange a meeting in a safe location. If you want to avoid him, I can make sure that happens too. The choice is yours. Theo thought about Marcus, about 5 years of lies and stolen medication and pretended love. He thought about his mother's disappointment and his father's inevitable anger. He thought about the trust fund he could not access and the life he did not want to return to. And he thought about Luca, on this unexpected presence who kept offering choices instead of demands. I do not want to see him, Theo said finally, but I do want to get my things from the apartment, the items that actually matter to me. Can you help with that? Of course, Luca said immediately. I will have some people handle it today. Make a list of what you want retrieved, and it will be here by tonight. Marcus will never know it happened. Just like that, Theo asked, amazed by the casual efficiency. Just like that, Luca confirmed. Being good at logistics is part of my job description. Now, are you all right? I know talking to family can be difficult. How did you know I talked to my family? Theo asked, then realized. You have cameras in here, do not you? Only in common areas, and I do not monitor them constantly, Luca said, sounding slightly apologetic. But I did check when my security system alerted me to activity in the office. I wanted to make sure you were safe. I am sorry if that feels invasive. It should have felt invasive, should have made Theo angry about privacy violations, but somehow it just felt like more evidence of Luca's careful protection. It is fine. And yes, I talked to my mother. It went about as well as expected. Family complications? Luca guessed. You could say that. Theo sank back into the office chair, suddenly exhausted again. Apparently breaking my engagement is going to cause all kinds of legal and social problems, and I need access to my trust fund, but my father controls it until I am 25, or married. Married to someone he approves of, you mean? Luca said dryly. Which you are no longer planning to be. Exactly. Theo rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. I'm starting to realize just how trapped I have been all along. Marcus was just the most obvious cage. Then perhaps it is time to break out of all the cages, Luca suggested. Starting with the ones you can control. Make your list of items to retrieve, rest, and we will talk more when I return. Everything else can wait until you are ready to face it. Luca, Theo said before the other man could hang up. Thank you. Again. I know I keep saying it, but I mean it every time. I know you do, Luca replied, and Theo could hear the smile in his voice. That is one of the things I like about you. You do not take kindness for granted. The call ended, leaving Theo alone with his thoughts and an empty apartment that somehow felt less lonely than the life he had left behind. He found paper and a pen, starting to list the things he wanted from his old place. Books, mostly. Photographs of people he actually cared about. His grandmother's jewelry box, the one thing he owned that held real sentimental value. Clothes could be replaced, furniture did not matter, but these small personal items were pieces of himself he was not ready to abandon. As he wrote, Theo found himself thinking about what Luca had said about breaking out of cages. The engagement had been one cage, but there were others. His family's expectations. Society's rules about what Omegas should be and do. The careful, small life he had built because it seemed safe and manageable. Maybe it was time to want something bigger, on something messier, something real. The question was whether he was brave enough to reach for it, and whether the dangerous man offering him shelter was part of the answer or just another beautiful cage waiting to close. The week that followed became a strange kind of paradise wrapped in uncertainty. Theo's belongings arrived exactly as Luca had promised, delivered by silent professionals who carried boxes into the guest bedroom without questions or judgment. Opening them felt like archaeology, excavating pieces of a person he used to be and deciding which parts were worth keeping. His grandmother's jewelry box went on the dresser immediately, a small anchor of genuine love in a sea of complicated feelings. The books filled a shelf Luca had mysteriously cleared for him. And his clothes hung in a closet that was bigger than his entire bedroom back at the apartment he had shared with Marcus. It was surreal, this life he was building inside someone else's space, but it was also the first time in years that Theo felt like he could breathe without permission. Luca continued his routine of leaving for business during the day and returning in the evenings, always with food or small offerings that suggested he had been thinking about Theo while away. Fresh flowers appeared in vases throughout the apartment, bright splashes of color that Luca claimed were just because the florist had a surplus. Books showed up on the coffee table, carefully selected titles that matched Theo's interests in ways that proved Luca had been paying attention to their conversations. Once, Theo found a box of expensive chocolates with a note that simply said, "For surviving difficult phone calls with family," and he had laughed until his sides hurt because somehow this dangerous criminal understood him better than people who had known him his entire life. They fell into an easy rhythm of shared dinners and long conversations that stretched into the night. Luca taught Theo to cook properly, not the basic survival cooking he had learned in college, but real techniques that required patience and precision. They made pasta from scratch, standing side by side at the counter while Luca's hands guided Theo's through the process of kneading dough. They prepared elaborate meals that took hours and filled the apartment with smells that felt like home in ways Theo's actual home never had. And through it all, Soon they talked about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of themselves in the safe darkness of Luca's kitchen while the city sparkled outside the windows like scattered stars. Theo learned that Luca spoke 4 languages fluently and could read 2 more, that he had grown up in a small town in Italy before his family immigrated when he was 12, that he loved classical music but claimed no one would take him seriously as a criminal if they knew he spent Sunday mornings listening to opera, that he had a weakness for terrible science fiction movies and could quote entire scenes from films Theo had never heard of, that despite everything he had done and everything he was, there was a gentleness in him that surfaced in quiet moments, a softness he seemed to save for people he decided were worth protecting. But there were also things Luca did not talk about, shadows he stepped around with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to guard certain truths. He never discussed the specifics of his business operations, never brought work into the apartment beyond occasional phone calls taken in his private office. He deflected questions about the scar through his eyebrow, about how he had really built his empire, about what exactly he had done to the people who hurt his sister. Theo understood that these were boundaries, lines drawn in sand that was not meant to be crossed, and he respected them even as his curiosity burned like a slow flame. The real complication came on the 8th night, when Theo found himself unable to sleep and wandered into the living room to find Luca already there, and standing by the windows with a glass of whiskey and an expression that looked like it carried the weight of the world. The city lights cast his profile in sharp relief, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the tension in his shoulders. He looked beautiful and dangerous and impossibly sad, and Theo's heart did something complicated in his chest that he was not ready to examine too closely. "Cannot sleep either?" Theo asked softly, not wanting to startle him. Luca turned, and something flickered across his face before settling into a careful neutrality. "Some nights are harder than others. Tonight is the anniversary of Isabella's death. I do not sleep well on these nights." Theo crossed the room without thinking, drawn by the rawness in Luca's voice and the need to offer comfort the way Luca had comforted him so many times. I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do?" "Your company is enough," Luca said, gesturing to the couch. They sat together in the semi-darkness, the only light coming from the windows and the soft glow of the city. "I usually spend this night alone, but I find I prefer having you here. Is that strange?" "No stranger than anything else about this situation," Theo replied, settling into the cushions beside Luca. Close enough to feel his warmth, far enough to maintain the careful distance they had been keeping. "Tell me about her. Not the sad parts, the good parts. What was she like when she was happy?" Luca's expression softened, memory smoothing away some of the grief. "She laughed like music, the kind that made everyone around her want to laugh too. She collected stray animals, always bringing home cats or dogs that needed help, driving our mother crazy with the menagerie. She wanted to be a veterinarian, spent all her free time volunteering at shelters and reading medical texts that were far too advanced for her age." He paused, taking a sip of his drink. "She used to leave me notes in ridiculous places. Inside my shoes, taped to the bathroom mirror, once inside a book she knew I was reading. Just little messages saying she loved me or hoping I had a good day. I still find them sometimes, tucked away in old belongings I have not gone through. It feels like getting mail from a ghost." "She sounds wonderful," Theo said, his throat tight with emotion for this girl he had never known. "I wish I could have met her." "She would have liked you," Luca said with certainty. "She had excellent taste in people, where present company excluded when it came to her own romantic choices. But she would have seen what I see in you." "What do you see in me?" Theo asked before he could stop himself, the question spilling out into the quiet. Luca looked at him then, really looked at him, and Theo felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with physical vulnerability. "I see someone who has been underestimated their entire life, but refuses to be diminished by it. Someone who is kind without being weak, who has survived betrayal without becoming bitter. Someone who deserves so much more than they have been given, and who is finally starting to realize it." The words settled over Theo like a blanket, warm and heavy and impossibly significant. "You barely know me," he whispered, though it felt less true every day. "I know enough," Luca replied. Or I know that you reorganized my bookshelf by theme and chronology when you thought I was not paying attention. I know that you leave the kitchen cleaner than you found it and always make enough coffee for 2 people even though you drink tea. I know that you cry during sad movies but try to hide it, and that you sing without realizing it when you think you are alone. I know that you are stronger than you believe and braver than you feel, and that watching you discover that has been one of the privileges of my life. Theo's breath caught in his throat, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Luca, But he did not know how to finish that sentence, did not have words for the tangle of emotions knotting in his chest. You do not have to say anything, Luca said gently. I am not asking for anything, Theo. I just want you to know that you are seen, truly seen, probably for the first time in your life. They sat in charged silence, the space between them feeling both infinite and impossibly small. Theo was acutely aware of every point where their bodies almost touched, the brush of Luca's shoulder against his, the way their hands rested mere inches apart on the couch cushion. It would be so easy to close that distance, to lean into the warmth and safety that Luca represented. But Theo was terrified of what that would mean, terrified of trading one complicated relationship for another before he had figured out who he was outside of someone else's expectations. I need to tell you something, Theo said finally, his voice shaking slightly, about your business proposition, the shipping records you wanted. Luca's expression shifted, or becoming more guarded. You do not have to make any decisions about that now. I meant what I said about not pressuring you. I know you did, Theo agreed, but I have been thinking about it, and I want to help you. Not because I feel obligated, but because I have been looking into what my father's company actually does, and I do not like what I found. Luca's attention sharpened. What did you find? The shipping manifests are fake, Theo said, the words tumbling out now that he had started. Or at least incomplete. I accessed the company database using my old credentials, the ones my father never thought to revoke because he assumed I was too obedient to abuse them. The official records show standard cargo, nothing interesting. But there are shadow files, encrypted documents that track different shipments. I could not break the encryption, but the file sizes and frequencies suggest something significant is being moved without proper documentation. That is very interesting, Luca said carefully, and potentially very dangerous information to possess. Your father would not react well if he discovered you had accessed those files. My father stopped having a say in my choices when he decided I was more useful as a social ornament than a person, Theo replied with more bitterness than he intended. If his company is involved in something illegal, I want to know. And if that information helps you, then maybe something good can come from all the years I spent being the perfect son? Luca studied him for a long moment, seeming to weigh something important. If you help me with this, there is no going back. Your family will know you betrayed their trust. They will cut you off completely, possibly worse. Are you prepared for that? I have already been cut off in every way that matters, Theo said. They control my money, my social standing, my entire life trajectory. But they do not control this. They do not control who I choose to help or what I choose to stand for. Maybe it is time I stood for something other than family loyalty that has never been returned. You are certain? Luca pressed. Because once we start down this path, I cannot protect you from all the consequences. I can keep you safe physically, but the social and financial fallout will be significant. Then I will deal with significant fallout, Theo said firmly. I am tired of being afraid, Luca. I am tired of making myself small to fit into spaces that were never meant for me anyway. If helping you means burning bridges with my family, then maybe those bridges needed to burn. Something shifted in Luca's expression, respect mixing with concern and something that might have been pride. All right, then we do this carefully and thoroughly. I will need copies of everything you can access, especially those encrypted files. I have people who can break encryption that your father probably thinks is unbreakable. But Theo, I need you to understand that what we find might be worse than you expect. People do not go to these lengths to hide legal activities. I know, Theo said, though the reality of it made his stomach turn. What, but I would rather know the truth than keep living in comfortable ignorance. They spent the next several hours planning, Luca explaining what he needed and how to access it without leaving traces. Theo was surprised by how much he understood about digital security and evidence collection, skills that seemed incongruous with the man who baked croissants and quoted poetry. But then, Luca had always been full of contradictions, layers upon layers that Theo was only beginning to understand. The data transfer happened 2 days later, Theo accessing his father's systems during business hours when unusual activity would be buried in the normal traffic. His hands shook as he copied files, each click feeling like a small betrayal and a larger liberation. He thought about his father's face, and the disappointment that would harden into rage when he discovered what Theo had done. He thought about his mother's tears and the social ostracism that would follow. But he also thought about the person he had been becoming under their control, small and scared and shrinking further every year. And he decided that person was not worth protecting anymore. Luca's encryption specialists broke the shadow files within hours, revealing exactly what Theo had feared and suspected. The Hartwell Shipping Company was moving drugs, weapons, and worse things. Theo did not want to think about too carefully. His father had built an empire on legitimate business as a cover for trafficking that would send him to prison for life if it was ever exposed. The evidence was damning, detailed, and impossible to deny. "What do we do with this?" Theo asked. She staring at the printed reports spread across Luca's dining table. His entire world had just imploded, every assumption about his family shattered like glass. "That depends on what you want," Luca said carefully. "I can use this information to shut down your father's operations and take over his distribution networks. That was my original plan. But you deserve to have a say in how this plays out." Theo thought about it, really thought about what justice would look like in this situation. "I want him to face consequences. Not because I am angry, though I am, but because if we just take over his operations, nothing really changes. Different criminals running the same business. I want this stopped. All of it." Luca was quiet for a moment. "That is not what I expected you to say." "Why not?" Theo challenged. "So you thought I would be fine with you becoming exactly what my father is? I thought you would understand that in this world, someone will always fill the vacuum. If I do not take over these operations, someone worse will." "Or maybe no one does," Theo argued. "Maybe we give this evidence to someone who can actually stop it. Law enforcement, journalists, someone who can make sure these networks are dismantled instead of just changing ownership." "That is naive," Luca said, but not unkindly. "The kind of people your father does business with do not go away just because one operation gets shut down. They adapt, rebuild, find new routes. All you would accomplish is putting yourself in incredible danger for temporary results." "Then what do you suggest?" Theo asked, frustration bleeding into his voice. "So, we just let it continue?" "I suggest we be smart about it," Luca replied. "We use this information to pressure your father into shutting down the worst of it, the human trafficking and weapons. The drugs are going to move one way or another, but we can at least stop the things that cause the most direct harm. And yes, I take over some of his routes, but I do it better, with rules and standards that your father never had. It is not perfect, but it is better than what exists now." Theo wanted to argue, wanted to insist on the perfect solution where everyone faced justice and systems were dismantled and good triumphed completely. But he was learning that the world Luca operated in did not work that way, that sometimes better was the best you could hope for. "I hate that you are probably right. I hate it too sometimes," Luca admitted. "Sure, but I learned a long time ago that perfect is the enemy of good enough. We do what we can with what we have, and we try to minimize harm even when we cannot eliminate it completely." They spent the next week executing Luca's plan with the precision of a military operation. Luca confronted Theo's father in his office, laying out the evidence in stark detail and making it clear that cooperation was not optional. Theo listened to the phone call on speaker, hearing his father's bluster turn to fear when he realized the scope of what Luca knew. The deal was simple: shut down the trafficking operations, turn over the distribution networks to Luca's control, and retire quietly. In exchange, the evidence stayed private and the Hartwell family reputation remained intact. "And my son?" Theo's father asked, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "I assume he is involved in this somehow." Your son is under my protection, Luca said calmly. You will not contact him, threaten him, or attempt to leverage family connections to punish him. He is free of you and your expectations permanently. Consider it part of the price for your cooperation. He is my son, his father started, but Luca cut him off. He was your son. You forfeited that relationship when you treated him like property instead of a person. Now he is simply someone you used to know, and you will keep it that way. The call ended, and Theo sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. Luca had not just negotiated a business deal. He had negotiated Theo's complete freedom from his family, had burned every bridge and slammed every door with the finality of a judge's gavel. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and exactly what Theo had needed someone to do for him. "Are you all right?" Luca asked, watching him with concern. "I do not know," Theo admitted. "I think I just became an orphan by choice." "You became free," Luca corrected gently. "There is a difference. Your father may have contributed genetic material, but he stopped being a parent the moment he decided his business was more important than your well-being. You do not owe him anything, least of all your continued suffering." "What happens now?" Theo asked, feeling untethered and strange. "I have no family, no money of my own, no clear path forward. I am completely dependent on you, and that terrifies me almost as much as everything else." Luca crossed the room and knelt in front of where Theo sat, taking his hands in a gesture that was grounding and gentle. "Here is what happens now. You stay here for as long as you want or need. You figure out who you are when no one is telling you who to be. You decide what kind of life you want to build, and I help you build it in whatever way I can. And when you are ready, if you are ever ready, we talk about what this is between us. This thing that is definitely not just friendship, but does not have to be defined before you are prepared to define it." Theo's heart felt too big for his chest, full of emotions he did not have names for. "You would wait, even though you could have anyone. You would wait for me to figure myself out? I have waited my whole life to meet someone who makes me want to be better than I am," Luca said simply. "I can wait a little longer for them to be ready to want me back." "I do want you," Theo whispered, the truth spilling out before he could stop it. "I am just scared that I am confusing gratitude with something else, or that I am jumping from one relationship into another without learning to stand on my own first. I do not want to be the person who needs rescuing. I want to be the person who chooses you because I want you, not because I need you." "Then that is what you will become," Luca said, his dark eyes steady and sure. "And I will be here when you are ready, whether that is tomorrow or a year from now or never. Because you are worth waiting for, Theo Hartwell. And you are worth everything." Tears spilled down Theo's cheeks, hot and unstoppable, releasing months of pent-up fear and grief and hope. Luca pulled him into an embrace that felt like coming home, strong arms wrapped around him while he cried out everything he had been holding in. It was not romantic in the traditional sense, no passionate kisses or dramatic declarations. It was simply two damaged people holding each other in the wreckage of their pasts and deciding that maybe, possibly, they could build something better together. The resolution with Marcus came unexpectedly, 3 weeks after Theo had left. The ex-fiancé showed up at Luca's building lobby, demanding to see Theo with the kind of entitled rage that had probably worked on other people. But Luca's security team was not other people. So when they called up to the penthouse to ask how to proceed, Theo, who had been practicing standing on his own 2 feet, made a decision. "I will meet him," Theo said, surprised by his own calm, "but not alone and not here, somewhere neutral." They arranged to meet in a cafe downtown, public enough to prevent any scenes but private enough for a real conversation. Theo dressed carefully that morning, choosing clothes that made him feel confident and strong. Luca offered to come along, but Theo declined. This was something he needed to do himself, one more step toward becoming the person he wanted to be. Marcus looked terrible, which gave Theo a petty satisfaction he was not entirely proud of. His ex-fiancée's expensive suit could not hide the weight he had lost or the shadows under his eyes. When he saw Theo, and something complicated crossed his face, relief and anger and something that might have been genuine regret. "You look good," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from Theo. Better than I expected after everything. I am good, Theo replied evenly. Better than I have been in years, actually. I need to explain, Marcus started, but Theo held up a hand. You do not need to explain anything. I know what you did and why you did it. You were in debt, you panicked, and you decided my medication was a commodity you could trade. I understand the logic even if I find it disgusting. Marcus flinched at the blunt assessment. It was not that simple. I was in trouble, real trouble, and I did not know what else to do. You could have told me the truth, Theo said. You could have asked for help, explained the situation, or worked with me to find a solution. Instead, you lied and stole and put my life in danger. Do you have any idea what could have happened if I had gone into heat somewhere less safe? I know, Marcus said quietly. And I am sorry, for whatever that is worth now. I never meant for it to get that far. I thought I could fix everything before you noticed. Well, I noticed, Theo said. And now I know exactly what you value more than my well-being. The engagement is over, legally and permanently. I have already filed the paperwork to break our contract. Your family can sue mine if they want, but they will not get anywhere. My father has bigger problems than a broken engagement. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means the Hartwell family is dealing with some internal issues that make a failed engagement look like nothing. Matsu, you dodged a bullet, honestly. You do not want to be associated with us right now. Is this about that man? Marcus demanded, his alpha instincts finally surfacing. The one you have been staying with? People are talking, Theo. They say you moved in with some criminal, that you have been seen around the city with him. Do you have any idea what that does to your reputation? I do not care about my reputation, Theo said, and meant it completely. I care about being safe and happy and treated with respect, none of which I got from you. So you traded me for a gangster? Marcus's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from other patrons. That is your idea of an upgrade? I traded you for my freedom, Theo corrected coldly. Luca is just someone who helped me realize I deserved better than what I was settling for. If you cannot understand that difference, then we never understood each other at all. Marcus seemed to deflate, his anger burning out as quickly as it had flared. I really am sorry, Theo. I know I messed up. I know I do not deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that I did care about you, in my own broken way. I believe you, Theo said, and surprisingly he did. But caring about someone is not the same as treating them right. You have to actually do the work of being a good partner, not just feel bad when you fail at it. They talked for another hour, laying out the practical details of separating their lives. Marcus had already moved Theo's remaining belongings out of the apartment, boxing up anything he thought Theo might want. He had paid back the money he made selling the medication, even though Theo suspected Luca had something to do with that particular development. By the time they parted ways, there was no dramatic closure, no movie-perfect reconciliation or final declarations. Just two people who had failed each other in different ways, acknowledging that failure and moving forward separately. Theo returned to Luca's penthouse feeling lighter than he had in months, like he had finally closed a chapter that had been hanging open. He found Luca in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the focused attention he brought to everything he did. The Mafia boss looked up when Theo entered, his expression softening with concern. How did it go? Luca asked. It went, Theo replied, moving to help without being asked. They had fallen into this easy partnership, cooking together like they had done it for years instead of weeks. See, he apologized. I accepted it without forgiving him. We worked out the logistics of separating completely. It was very civil and surprisingly painless. Good, Luca said simply. You deserve to have that conversation on your terms. They cooked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone well enough to not need constant chatter. Theo found himself watching Luca, really looking at him properly for the first time without fear or uncertainty clouding his vision. This man who had saved him, protected him, given him space to heal and grow. This dangerous criminal with a soft heart and careful hands who quoted poetry and mourned his sister and treated Theo like something precious. I think I'm ready, Theo said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. Oh, Luca looked up from the vegetables he was chopping. Ready for what? To define this, Theo gestured between them. Us, Whatever this is, I have spent the past month figuring out who I am alone, and I am ready to figure out who I could be with you. Luca set down his knife carefully, giving Theo his complete attention. Are you certain? Because I do not want you to feel pressured or like you owe me anything. I am certain, Theo said firmly, and I do not feel pressured. I feel ready. Ready to take a risk on something that might be amazing or might be a disaster, but at least it will be my choice, my risk, my life. He took a breath, stepping closer. I like you, Luca Moretti. I like who you are and who I am when I am with you. I want to see where this goes. If you still want that too. Luca's smile started slow and spread like sunrise, transforming his entire face into something bright and almost boyish. I want that more than I can properly express. But Theo, you need to understand what you are signing up for. My life is complicated and dangerous. There will always be risks, always be people who might try to hurt you to get to me. I can protect you, but I cannot make my world completely safe. I know, Theo said, but your world is honest about its dangers. My old world pretended to be safe while poisoning me slowly from the inside. I would rather face real dangers with someone I trust than fake safety with someone I cannot. Then we do this, Luca agreed, reaching out to take Theo's hand. Slowly, carefully, with full honesty about what we both want and need. No more secrets. See, no more half-truths. Just two people building something real. Just two people building something real, Theo repeated, and it sounded like a promise. Their first kiss happened later that night, after dinner and wine and conversation that stretched until the city lights outside started to dim with approaching dawn. It was gentle and questioning, a tentative exploration of new territory. Theo tasted wine on Luca's lips and something darker, the danger and damage that would always be part of who he was. But there was also sweetness there, genuine care and affection, and the promise of something worth the risk. The months that followed were not easy, but they were real in ways nothing in Theo's life had ever been. He started working for a non-profit that helped vulnerable Omegas escape bad situations, while using his experience to guide others through the kind of crisis he had survived. He took classes in business management, not because his father wanted him to, but because he wanted to understand systems well enough to change them. He made friends outside of his old social circle, people who valued him for who he was rather than what family he came from. Luca supported all of it, providing financial backing for Theo's projects and space for him to grow into the person he wanted to become. Their relationship developed slowly, built on foundation of friendship and mutual respect that made the romantic elements feel natural rather than rushed. They had their share of arguments and complications, moments when Luca's dangerous work collided with Theo's growing moral clarity. But they talked through it, or compromised where they could and held firm where they could not, and somehow built something that worked despite all the reasons it should not have. A year after that fateful night at the charity gala, Theo stood in the penthouse that had become his home, looking out at the city that had witnessed his transformation. He was 24 years old, finally living on his own terms, finally understanding what it meant to be free. Behind him, Luca emerged from the bedroom, wrapping arms around Theo's waist and resting his chin on Theo's shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" Luca asked, his voice warm against Theo's ear. "I am thinking about how different my life looks from what I planned," Theo admitted. "A year ago, I was engaged to someone who was stealing from me, trapped in a family that saw me as property, convinced that my small, controlled life was the best I could hope for. Now I am with you, doing work that matters, building a life that is actually mine. It is terrifying and amazing and nothing like I expected." "Regrets?" Luca asked quietly. "Not even one," Theo replied, turning in Luca's arms to face him properly. "You saved my life that night, but more importantly, you gave me the space to save myself. I will never be able to repay that." "You already have," Luca said, pressing a kiss to Theo's forehead. "Every day you choose to stay, every time you challenge me to be better, every moment you show me what real love looks like instead of the broken version I thought was normal. You saved me too, Theo. You just did it more quietly." They stood there together as the sun rose over the city, are two broken people who had found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something beautiful from the ruins. It was not a fairy tale ending, because real life never is. There would be more challenges, more complications, more moments when they had to choose between what was easy and what was right. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. Theo had learned that freedom was not about escaping every cage. It was about choosing which walls to keep and which to tear down. It was about surrounding yourself with people who saw you as a person rather than a possession. It was about being brave enough to want more than what you had been told you deserved. And most importantly, it was about understanding that sometimes the most dangerous person in your life could also be the safest, or as if you were willing to take the risk of trusting them. The Mafia enigma had found him first, and Theo had discovered that sometimes being found was exactly the same as finding yourself. If this story touched your heart, made you feel seen, or gave you hope that freedom is possible even from the most complicated situations, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more emotional BL romance stories that explore love, betrayal, redemption, and the courage it takes to choose yourself. What did you think of Theo and Luca's journey? Drop a comment below sharing your favorite moment from the story, or tell us what kind of romance you'd like to hear next. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming stories featuring complex characters, unexpected love, ardent, and the beautiful mess of choosing happiness over expectation. Your support means everything and helps us continue creating stories that celebrate love in all its forms. Thank you for being part of this community. See you in the next story.